Hi all, it's Karen and
Pluto.
here for Karen and Blutos on another review channel, another movie review, obviously. This one I have been really excited to see. He didn't watch it with me when
I'm
I
not feeling
watched
real
it.
good.
You're not feeling good.
I don't know. My stomach is feeling weird.
You need to go lay down.
I don't know. Maybe later after you
Okay.
get this done.
All right.
I just feel weird.
So this one's a little close to my heart. Basically, I
That's why I
couldn't
wanted
wait
to
to.
watch it.
Yeah,
But
I can't wait. I couldn't wait to see it because it's about a local
maybe you have to buy it
hero.
for me.
Yeah, I do want to get it. I think I checked on Amazon the other day. It was down to 15. So,
It'll go cheaper.
so this one is A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. It's an hour and 49 minutes. It's PG. It's from 2019. Obviously, it's regarding a magazine article that was written regarding Mr. Rogers, who, like I said, he's a local guy for us here.
Not for me.
Not for you, but for Bob and I. It was
I heard
always
of him. He seems cool.
I was just very excited with this because it's like, oh, this is a local thing, and my heart was just swelling the whole time I was watching this.
Okay.
One of the things I absolutely loved that they did with this was they kind of filmed it like they would film one of his shows.
That's cool.
So it was kind of like that's the way it was. That was kind of the premise of the whole movie. So that made
I
it
watched that.
enjoyable. Plus, they also used like the little miniatures. Damn stink bugs back again.
Think your bug bag, yeah.
Yeah, like the miniatures they would use in his show, they used that throughout the movie for like a lot of the travel scenes. So I thought that was pretty
It's
cool.
like, who never watched Mr. Rogers?
Yeah. I'm gonna kill that bug.
If you catch him, I'll eat him.
So basically at the
Maybe make my stomach feel
beginning,
better.
yeah, basically it says this is inspired by a true story, but some of the stuff was changed because I think actually the guy who wrote the article, I think his name was different from what I saw in the credits at the end. But basically, it does,
Okay.
as I said, it does the whole Mr. Rogers opening and like it's a Mr. Rogers episode.
I like the intro.
So he kind of goes through talking about things, and Tom Hanks did an amazing job.
Well, who else could do that besides
I
him?
don't know who
No
else
one.
could do it, but Tom Hanks was absolutely amazing as Mr. Rogers.
Did Tom Hanks ever do a bad movie?
I
We
think
do that list?
I think Joe versus the Volcano, but I never
I
really
didn't see it.
saw that, so I can't.
Okay.
So
Moving
I
on.
guess we're gonna have to do a Tom Hanks list. I mean, I'm gonna digress here a
He
little bit.
knows you're alone.
That's the bit part.
But he's in it.
I'm like torn now, which is my favorite Tom Hanks movie, Forrest Gump or this.
Bachelor party.
Because Forrest Gump has been my absolute favorite, but this one might have topped it now.
Bachelor party.
Basically, so Mr. Rogers is kind of doing his episode, and he talks about wanting to introduce us to his new friend named Lloyd. And
Is
we're
Mr.
back.
McFeely in this?
There's an actor playing Mr. McFeely, like
Well, I
briefly.
think he's not around anymore either.
No, I thought he was still alive.
Look up and put it in the description. Or on the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, because I know Mr. Rogers passed away a few years ago.
Yeah. Okay.
He's actually buried not too far from here too.
We should do a video there.
Yeah. So it's back in 1998 is when this part is taking place with everything. It basically starts at Lloyd's at some award thing, and he's receiving an award for some magazine article he wrote. And apparently, Lloyd is known for being a real. But that just like tumble out of there.
I don't know.
Anyways, yeah, I'm so distracted tonight by the damn stink bugs flying around.
Yeah, let's talk about Mr.
But
Rogers.
Lloyd's known for not being very nice in his writings, from what from what I'm gathering. Apparently,
Well, that's not nice.
he'll meet with people and then twist things around, and like a lot of people don't want to meet with him because of the way he twists and
Well, I
write
wouldn't.
things. So it goes to the next day. Lloyd and his wife Andrea are packing for an overnight trip to his sister's wedding with their baby, who's Gavin. His brother's going on. He goes, "Oh, we can skip this one. That's why we had a baby, so you have excuses not to go." He goes, "It's not like she won't be getting married again next year." Like apparently his sister's been married several times.
Oh, she's one of those types.
And then his mom had died, and he doesn't have a good relationship with his dad.
That
So
was supposed to be happy.
it has its moments. It's serious in some parts.
All right.
So basically, it comes down. Andrea does eventually tell Lloyd that his sister, I don't know if I have her name written down anywhere, did reach out to their father, and he is going to be there. And Lloyd's kind of like he blames his dad for a lot of things, especially with his mother's death. so he's kind of like really holding on to all that. Um, there's a funny scene where they're trying to fight to get the car seat into the taxi, which is kind of comical because he's trying to do it. Andrea's like, hold the baby. So she gives him the baby and she gets it in no time. So it's kind of,
Okay.
that's kind of comical as well. So, Jerry, not Jerry, Jerry's dad, but Lloyd and Andrea are talking about, the whole fancy wedding thing because they eloped because they were like, they didn't want the whole big wedding thing.
Okay. Like
So,
what you did.
Jerry kind of comes over and meets Andrea and Gavin. Well, she goes away so Lloyd and Jerry can talk. And um, it kind of, Jerry kind of starts talking about his ex wife, Lloyd's mom. Lloyd doesn't appreciate it and they get into a fight at his sister's wedding.
Okay.
So then we cut back to Mr. Rogers
Wow, I thought you forgot about him.
discussing about how anger affects you and how Lloyd's angry
You would
and
know
better.
about anger.
Yeah, I take an anger management training and I'm still angry.
Yes,
That's
you are.
always my joke. So
Yep.
he's kind of talking about that, and then there's a knock at the door, and Mr. McFeely's there, and he
Speedy
brings
delivery.
a videotape
What's that?
for them to watch on Picture Picture
I remember that.
about how magazines are made. Which is it was actually very interesting because I mean, if they did something like this, I don't remember because I know Mr. Rogers was on the air, then it was off the air, and then they came back on the air at one point, which they do talk about that during this movie.
Okay.
And basically, I put on here it looks dated because
Well, it's supposed to.
yeah, it's supposed to. So then we basically cut back to Lloyd. He works for Esquire magazine. I'm not sure if that's the magazine that did publish this article down the road, but basically he's meeting with his boss. That's where the whole how to make a magazine, it kind of segues back to our story. And basically he's meeting with his boss and his boss says, well, we're sending you on assignment. And he goes about writing, they're doing an issue on heroes and he's to do a profile on Mr. Rogers. And he goes,
Cool.
I don't write stuff like that. I don't do this. And she goes, well, people need to see a different side of you. You need to do this. And she goes, and also Mr. Rogers is the only one that will meet with you.
Probably because he doesn't know.
Yeah, well, they kind of talk about that later.
No.
So Lloyd goes home. It turns out his dad's outside and Jerry's outside and wants to talk to him. And Lloyd's like, no, and goes away. So,
Next.
Lloyd walks into the apartment and there's a baby play date going on with his wife and his son and some other moms and their children. So, I guess before he came home, he called to try to make arrangements to make an appointment with Mr. Rogers. So then the phone rings and it's Mr. Rogers calling him directly.
Cool.
And Lloyd just explained, like, I was given this assignment. I need to meet with you. And Mr. Rogers starts asking him all these questions about himself. And he goes on like, well, when I meet people, I want to be friends. So I want to get to know you as my friend. And Lloyd's like, okay, this guy's like out there. So, Lloyd asked him some questions about what he does with his program and everything else, just to try to get like some background. Because the profile he's supposed to write is only supposed to be like 100 words or something like that. It's supposed to
Wow.
be a real short because they're doing a hero profile article.
If it's about heroes, wouldn't it be more than 100 words?
Well, they were doing it on various people. Because actually, I would love to find this whole article and read it at some point. But
Cool.
eventually, Lloyd talks to Andrea and is like, okay, I got this assignment. I'm going to have to go to Pittsburgh for a few days. And he says about meeting Mr. Rogers.
I'm in Pittsburgh.
And there's a funny thing, and you may have seen this in the trailers where she goes, don't ruin my childhood, because she knows how he is, how Lloyd is.
Okay.
Well, also, too, Lloyd looks out the window for a couple nights, and his dad's still sitting outside his building trying to talk to Lloyd. So we get, like I said, this is another one of the miniature scenes where they're showing him flying and everything, like using the airplane miniature. Like I said, I love that. I love that.
Okay.
So Lloyd arrives at the WQED station in Pittsburgh, which I do know where that is because I've driven by it several times. So it's kind of cool watching. I'm like, okay, I know where that's in. That's over. So it's kind of because I know they did film a lot of this, and I think it was filmed between Pittsburgh and New York because he did have an apartment in New York as well. So he gets there, meets
He's
up.
from Lake Trove, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, I
Cool.
think. Bob said his mother, Mr. Rogers' mother, lived a street or two over from where he grew up.
That's cool.
I remember him saying about that at one point. I think when we were out going around Latrobe, he was pointing out a couple things. So I know
Wow,
where
you live in a famous town.
I knew where my husband grew up, and I knew he said his Mr. Rogers' mother lived a street or two over from them.
That's
So
cool.
yeah, so Latrobe's known for a few things: banana splits and football, and Mr. Rogers.
Okay.
Yep.
That's a weird
So
combination, but okay.
no, I'm just saying that's some stuff that they're known for. Well,
And
Lloyd,
zombies.
yeah, that's Monroeville.
Close enough.
But anyways, Lloyd gets in the studio and he meets with I can't remember the guy's name, but I think he's kind of like Mr. Rogers' PR guy, kind of watches Mr. Rogers back and everything. He goes, "Oh, let me take you in, and we got to do a little filming, and then you'll get about a half hour, excuse me, to
You all
meet
right?
with him." Hiccups are kicking in
I
again.
thought you were feeling weird too.
No. So they go in, and Mr. Rogers is standing on his set doing a meet and greet with a child from Make a Wish.
That's cool.
And here they're running late. And it's so funny because they're showing like some of the like producer and the director, they're joking and they're like, can we fire him to get him on track? Joking about firing Mr. Rogers and everything. But apparently this is how he was. And also Mr. Rogers takes pictures of everybody he would meet so he could show his wife later.
That's cool.
So Lloyd's kind of observing and like seeing what they're doing. So they start to film an episode. And right when they're getting ready to start, Mr. Roger looks over and goes, and this is something, hey, Lloyd, like totally right in the middle of the shoot. So he goes over to meet with Lloyd real quick. And then he goes back and finishes filming what he's doing, but basically
Filling.
filming.
Sound like you said filling.
Oh, well, filming what he was doing, and basically he's doing this episode about trying to set up a tent, but he's doing like all this off the wall stuff with it. And then
Okay.
like he would film it, then he would go back and see how it looked and everything, and if it needed refilmed or not. So he was really active in the production of his show as well.
Like you with your stuff.
Yep. So basically, then in between takes during lunch is whenever he's meeting with Lloyd, kind of talking about things. But Mr. Rogers kind of keeps directing a lot of the stuff back to Lloyd because also from the fight from the wedding, Lloyd has a black eye.
Mr. Rogers punch him.
No, that was from whenever he got in the fight at the wedding with his
Oh,
father.
that'd been cool. Mr. Rogers punch somebody.
So basically, his people come. They're like, "Hey, we got to get going." And Lloyd's like, "I only had 20 minutes." They're like, "Well, sorry, he's a busy man." So Mr. Rogers hurries up and takes Lloyd's picture because he goes, I want to show this to Joanne. That's his wife." So they start filming again. They're doing the neighborhood make believe this time, and the director, somebody's holding Daniel Striped Tiger. And the director goes, "Are you ready, Daniel?" And he answers, and Lloyd says to somebody, "She's talking to the puppet," and they're like, "No, she's talking to Fred." Mr. Rogers was the voice of Daniel, and I believe King Friday the 13th,
I like him.
because those are the two puppets they show a lot during.
I like how his name was Friday the 13th.
Yeah, I always thought that was funny, even as a child, even though not that I knew anything with the Friday the 13th movies or anything like that. So Lloyd kind of sits and watches them filming this and is watching Mr. Rogers inside Daniel's clock doing his puppeting.
Okay.
Tickle.
That's what I had.
So basically it comes down to prior to all this too, Lloyd was doing some research and watching some old things with Mr. Rogers, like appearances he did, his show and everything. So Lloyd calls I guess it would be his editor, it's his boss or whatever at the magazine, and says he wants to do a more in-depth story. And he's basically told no, it's supposed to be this short, like 100-word thing. That's it.
That's not cool.
She's like, just get it done, turn it in.
Nah.
So Lloyd goes back to New York. He's back home, and in the middle of the night, oh no, he calls in the middle of the night when they're sleeping. And Mr. Rogers is like, I apologize. I didn't get to say goodbye to you because I was so busy, but I wanted to let you know I'm coming to New York if you want to catch up. And Lloyd's like, okay, yeah, that's great. So basically, Mr. Rogers and his wife, I guess, also I guess they split their time between Pittsburgh and New York City. So Mr. Rogers was up there filming a couple things for the show because he was meeting with this string quartet group or something.
Okay.
And I guess he did some other things while he was there. So after they're done filming with all that, Lloyd actually meets Joanne, Mr. Rogers' wife, and they're kind of talking, and they're talking about I can't, like I said, I can't remember his name or what his role is. That's why I refer to him as Mr. Rogers' PR person. And they're saying, "Oh yeah, so and so, we stole him from the governor, and he's very." I guess he used to work for one of the governors. I don't know if it was in Pennsylvania or not. I can't remember. And she was just saying he's very protective of Fred, and because they were saying about all these people outside, like shaking his hands and how he's intercepting and like so Mr. Rogers isn't lingering too long on anybody, but making contact with everybody as well. So Lloyd goes, "Well, asked Joanne, how's it feel to live with a saint?" And she
You would know.
looks and like, Bob's a saint?
I live here.
Oh, you live here. So Joanne goes, "He's not perfect. He's far from perfect. Wait, wrote down, she discussed with him how he works on ways to improve himself every day. Because she goes, he has a temper, he gets angry.
Like you.
But she said he also, I believe he was deeply religious because she said about him like praying and referring to the Bible, how he goes swimming every day. They play piano together. She's like, no, he is far from a saint. He's human.
I'm not.
Yeah. So, eventually, and you probably have seen this scene I'm going to be talking about here too, as well in the commercials, where Mr. Rogers and Lloyd are on the subway, and the kids start breaking into the song, and then everybody joins in. It's a beautiful day in the
Everybody knows
neighborhood. You
that.
know
I
that.
know that.
So, I mean, I think if you haven't seen the movie, you know this scene because that scene, I believe,
I'm
was
sure
part of
everybody
the
saw the
trailers.
show.
Yeah. Well, no, this scene from the movie.
Yeah, but I'm sure everybody watched this probably saw the show.
So,
Who hasn't?
Mr. Rogers says about how wonderful it was that they did that. But then they get back to his neighborhood in New York, Mr. Rogers' apartment, and Lloyd's trying to talk to him about, ask him some questions about the show. And Mr. Rogers is asking Lloyd about some things. And um,
Okay.
Mr. Rogers at one point opens this suitcase he was carrying, and he has King Friday the 13th and Daniel Striped Tiger in there. And Lloyd makes a remark about how they look kind of old and ratty and
They're
why
probably
not
originals.
upgrade or anything. And Mr. Rogers goes about them being his friends, and you don't do away with friends. And he's trying to talk to him and ask him like, don't you have something from your childhood that's sacred to you or that you can remember? And he goes, well, about Lloyd goes about the only thing he can think of is old rabbit that he got from his mother when he was younger. But I'm not exactly sure how old Lloyd was when his mom passed. But Lloyd kind of gets annoyed with Mr. Rogers at this point because like he wants to just do his interview and get
How
it
could you
done
get
with.
annoyed with Mr. Rogers?
Yeah. Well, it's like
Wow.
Lloyd wants to get his information so he can write his article, and Mr. Rogers is kind of,
They'd be like, how could you get annoyed with Bob Ross?
yeah. So Lloyd ends up storming out of the apartment and leaving.
What an idiot.
Because basically he's getting tired of Mr. Rogers trying to get him to talk about himself, meaning
Okay.
Lloyd.
You almost done?
Getting there.
Okay.
So he gets back home, and this was after this happened, and he gets there, and his dad, Jerry, and his girlfriend are at the apartment trying to make amends with Lloyd. Um, and Jerry's kind of going on, like trying to apologize. Well, Jerry ends up having a medical crisis, and they have to call an ambulance and take him to the hospital. Well, here it turns out Jerry is dying. I'm not
Wow.
sure if he has cancer or exactly what's going on, but Lloyd, Andrea, and Gavin are all at the hospital, and um, Lloyd's kind of like, I shouldn't be here. He's not really family, kind of going on and on about things. And then him and Andrea are talking, and all of a sudden, Lloyd's like, I got to go back to Pittsburgh. He's just out of the blue. I need to get out of here. I need to go back to Pittsburgh. So him and Andrea kind of bicker a little bit. She's like, no, you need to be here with your family. You need to be here with us.
Yep.
Well, this is where it gets a little trippy here.
Okay.
Because Andrea keeps saying about how he's too focused on work. So he does go back to Pittsburgh in the studio. But this kind of turns out to be a little bit of a dream sequence
Oh no.
because basically he goes back and it's like Lloyd is part of this episode that's being filmed for some reason. And Mr. Rogers is trying to talk to him, and then they end up in the neighborhood of Maple Leaf, and Lloyd is dressed with like rabbit ears on, and he's saying, "Oh, old rabbit's here." And Andrea, his wife, is playing. Oh God, I can't remember the character's name, but eventually, like, there's this whole dream sequence, and they're talking about feelings and everything. Well, then here, it goes that Lloyd is passed out on the set with everybody standing around him.
Wow.
So, like, how he got there and everything, we don't know 100%. So basically, he wakes up in some random bedroom and he hears these pianos playing, and he goes downstairs and here Mr. Rogers and his wife are like doing dueling pianos with the same piece. It was
Okay.
actually very cool, but they had these like two huge grand pianos in their one room and they're both playing them. So Mr. Rogers says, "Oh, good, Lloyd, you're up. We're so sorry we woke you up. Come on, you're hungry. Let's go get something to eat." So they go to some um, restaurant, and here it turns out that Mr. Rogers is a vegetarian.
Okay.
True or not, I don't know, but I thought that was quite interesting.
I don't know.
So, everyone's kind of looking, and they're like, "Oh my God, it's Mr. Rogers!" And Mr. Rogers is just focused on Lloyd the whole time. He's not like anything, and he's kind of talking to Lloyd about what's going on and everything. And he goes, "I want you to do something for me." He goes, "I want you to close your eyes for 1 minute and figure out who, I think it's something along the lines like, who's important in your life, who's important to you." And you see everybody in the restaurant doing this. And it's kind of at this point, Lloyd has, I don't know if I want to say an epiphany or whatever it's called,
Okay.
and realizes like his priorities and where he needs to be. So he goes back
Yeah.
home, and Lloyd and Andrea are out taking Gavin for a walk, and they're kind of discussing what happened. And Lloyd's kind of filling Andrea in on what happened. And he goes, "I realize what's important is you and Gavin, my kind of
Well,
all
yeah.
that." So he actually goes and stays with Jerry and Jerry's girlfriend. Because then he kind of comes to the rationale at this point. He goes, "My father's dying." So they kind of work on, he goes and stays with Jerry, trying to make amends with each other. Then eventually Gavin and Andrea come and stay as well, um, while Jerry's, slowly dying at this point.
Wow.
Lloyd, actually, in the middle of all this, ends up writing this whole article based on everything he's experienced with Mr. Rogers. And that was one thing I forgot to mention. His PR person said earlier, "I'm going to be watching what you do because I let Fred read your articles prior to agreeing to meet with you."
Wow.
So Lloyd writes the article. It ends up being, I think, 10,000 words or something. I think they mentioned
Oh, that's
something.
cool.
And he gives it to Andrea's reading it, and she's just like, "This is good." And he goes, "But it's not what they want." She goes, "Submit it anyways."
That's good.
So basically, he does submit it, and his editor absolutely loves it and tells him it's going to be the cover article for that
Cool.
hero issue. So while they're still staying at the house, Lloyd's sister and her husband show up, and he's kind of apologizing, and she's like, "Don't worry about it. It was the best wedding yet," about the fight that happened. So they're all kind of there spending time with Jerry. And then Mr. Rogers shows up and brings a pie.
Okay.
So he spends the afternoon with the family talking with them. And here, what's even funnier is Mr. Rogers is asking about each of them. Well, he looks at Andrea and he goes, "Andrea, how are you feeling about daycare?" Because she was some sort of an attorney. I can't remember what she was, like some big time attorney with some group or something. And she's like, "I'm still having issue." And Lloyd looks at her and she goes, "What? You're not the only one that can talk to Mr. Rogers."
Okay.
So the other cute thing is too, when Mr. Roger meets Gavin, he introduces himself and he goes, "And I hope someday you and I can be friends."
Like
So
me and your friends.
yeah. So they're talking about Lloyd's article, and everybody's saying about how great it is and everything. Um, well, then Mr. Rod, his PR person, was showing up to pick him up, and he was excusing himself to go, but he went over to shake Jerry's hand before he left, and he whispered something in Jerry's ear, and Jerry kind of nodded, and Lloyd's walking Mr. Rogers out, and he goes, "What did you say to my dad?" And he goes, "I feel people at this time are closer to God when they're near death." It wasn't quite this, but he was just basically saying somebody in this time is usually closer to God, so I asked him to say a prayer for me.
That's
So,
cool.
and I think I forgot to mention too, when Lloyd had that like dream sequence thing. He had a part of the dream was his mom was there, and his mom was telling him to let go of his anger. So I think that's kind of what also led to
That's what you need to do.
I try to let go.
Try.
So, basically, the next scene they do the miniatures, and it's Jerry's funeral.
Wow.
Yeah, they had a miniature hearse and everything, and little cemetery set up. It was actually interesting.
Wow.
And after the funeral, Lloyd and Andrea are discussing, what they're going to do as far as Gavin's care goes. And Lloyd goes, "Well, why don't you go back to work and I'll stay home with Gavin?" And Andrea's looking at him like, "Are you feeling okay?" And he goes, "No." He goes, "I'm fine." He goes, "Gavin and I had a discussion, and we can do this. He and I can hang out at home, and you can go back to work." So, basically, the ending is the wrapping up of the episode. Kind of a little bit of an update on Jerry, Lloyd, and a Christmas picture with the family and everything. And then, kind of, the episode ends. He goes and checks it and says, "Okay, yeah, that's good." Well, then everybody starts leaving, and Mr. Rogers goes over to his piano and starts playing, and that's it.
That's cool.
So my heart's just swelling even talking about this because
Jeez.
I love this. I
That's
absolutely
cool.
love this. If you have not seen it, you do need to see it.
I'll
Like I
watch it.
said, part of it might be for me because it's, about a local guy here,
Yep.
but it's somebody I think a lot of us grew up watching. And I mean,
Even me.
it's probably a little bit more of a serious movie over here than what we usually do. But like I
That's
said,
good.
I'm bummed I waited so long to see it, but just didn't get to the theater to see it. But as soon as I was able to, it was like I have to rent this. I absolutely have to see this. So I can't recommend it anymore.
Cool.
All right, we wrapping up because I know you're not feeling good.
Yeah, I gotta go to the bathroom.
Okay, so that is it. Please check this movie out. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell icon so you know when
Yep.
we post new content. Share the page; it would be greatly appreciated. Subscribers and watchers, thank you. You guys are awesome. Please keep coming back for more. And watchers, subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. K-Doll Games, Toys, and More, my other channel, toy and game reviews over there. Amazon wish list is posted, so if you want to hook us up, that
That'd be
would
cool.
be great. If there's something you want us to review, let me know in the comments. I know we've had a couple requests. I think I have a couple more we still have to get to. We just haven't gotten to yet, but those will be coming. If I can't locate it, if you're willing to get it, that would be great. And I think that's it because Bluto's got to go take a poop. I'll see you in the
Yep.
next one. Bye.
Bye.